Hello, welcome again. This is our third session of our Fort Collins Issues Forum, our MX experience for the fall. We are here for doing this over 10 weeks. And thus far, we have heard from Isaac about immigration issues. And last week, we heard from Christina Taylor about affordable childcare. This week, I want to introduce to you Pam Brewer, and she is from Homeward Alliance. And so she's going to talk to us about the various issues related to homelessness and how people are homeless and what all Homeward Alliance provides, so that we get a better understanding of that issue as it relates to Fort Collins. So I'm going to turn it over to Pam. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here today. It's always nice to come to First Pres. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with how much this church has supported our organization over the years. If email had a speed dial, Corey would be on it. We just find that everyone here is very gracious, and we can easily come to you when we have needs, and we really, really appreciate it. So thank you. I thought today that I could take questions as I talk. So if you have a question to ask, even before the Q&A time, just let me know and I'll repeat the question into the microphone. I can get really excited about this material and just start talking and not stop. And I feel like that's probably pretty boring for you all. So just slow me down a little bit. So a little background about our organization. Our name now is Homeward Alliance, and we've been around since 2008. But you all might know us better as Homeless Gear. Ken John was our founder, and we just literally were started by a group of volunteers who saw a need in our community, people who needed backpacks and sleeping bags, and a community that was filled with backpacks and sleeping bags, collecting dust in people's garages. So that's where we started, and even though we've expanded programs quite a bit, our volunteer programs are still really central to what we do, and we're still very much a volunteer-powered organization. Our two most active volunteer programs right now are mobile laundry, which you might know Woody and Pat. We have a retrofitted box truck that has 6 washers and 7 dryers that goes to spots in Loveland and Fort Collins, washing laundry for families and individuals. And we also have a very active bike repair program that has a big trailer with about 20 volunteer mechanics. We go to the Poudre Valley Mobile Home Park each month, the Murphy Center, Red Tail Ponds, Harvest Farms, making sure people that are homeless or housing insecure have a great way to get to work and school and just around town. But in terms of our professionally run programs, our biggest one is the Murphy Center. Have you all been to the Murphy Center before? Okay, about half of you. So for those of you who want a refresher or have never been, I'd love to provide a tour for you as an individual or just a group you have. I have cards right there. Basically what the Murphy Center is the front door to our community's homeless services. So at its heart, it's a container, a building, and in it is about 20 different nonprofits that work collaboratively. And Homeward Alliance's job is to manage those collaborations, to provide basic services like showers, laundry, lockers, computers. And we also operate like the intake portion, which is now an entryway into our region's coordinated entry system, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So basically, if you know of somebody experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity, meaning they're worried they're going to lose their place to live, they're couch surfing, they're sleeping in their car, the Murphy Center is a great place for people to start. It's really a way to kind of get them to the right people as quick as we can. I won't go over all our programs because they are on our website and they are on this paper that I shared, but our website is www.homewardalliance.org, And if you go to programs, you'll see a list of them. But some highlights, basically what we do is try to have a continuum of services for people, very basic needs, gear, food, laundry, showers, all the way to housing case management. And our goal for every person that we serve is housing in whatever form that looks like to them. So we spend a lot of our efforts on getting people to that finish line. We have some things like behavioral health services. So for example, we have peer navigators. That's a new program this year. Those are people with lived experience in substance use disorder. They're professional staff members who've gotten training, and their job is to connect to people when they're ready to get help for their substance use disorder. So my favorite story is a woman who approached our peer navigator last year, at the end of last year, and said that she wanted help quitting cigarettes. And this was a woman who had a very active meth addiction. And maybe the old way would have said, why are you worrying about cigarettes? You are homeless and you have meth addiction. And the idea with peer navigation is there's no wrong door and you meet people where they're at. And so the peer said, sure, we'll work on that. And then you guys can probably guess the end of the story. She's now housed in a permanent supportive housing. She's in recovery for her meth addiction, and it all started because she found the strength to say, hey, I want to work on cigarettes, and also that we had the person in the right place at the right time. We have a very robust employment services program. It's called Hand Up. It's the only employment program for people who are homeless in our region, and we're able to provide case management in a way that meets that population's needs. So if you're homeless and you're looking for work, you have different concerns than someone who's not homeless. You know that if you bring your backpack, that employer is not going to probably hire you. If you look unkept, if you haven't showered, if you don't have a mailing address, if you don't have a cell phone, those are all things that are probably going to cause someone to say no thank you. So our job is to kind of help people get ready, get a phone, get showered and shaved, get a haircut, get a mailing address. We have a career closet that's focused on the trades. So if you need non-slip black shoes and black pants to work at a restaurant, then we can get those to you that day. Same with things like flagging and other occupations. We help a lot of people get their truck driving certificate, CDL. I always forget what that's called. I'm bad at acronyms. But basically, when you go about your business in town, you probably would be shocked at how many people that are serving you are homeless. Fast food workers, flaggers, daycare workers, Sam's Club, Walmart. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess fortunately, those folks are invisible to us as being homeless, but I think it's always helpful to remember that folks are working, even though they don't have a home. So we have a question.
So when they get their paycheck, the ones that do get them, do you help them with a bank account or that kind of thing?
Yeah, we absolutely can help people with bank accounts, but what we're finding is a lot of people who are starting out, the employers now pay people onto debit cards. Even King Soopers does that with all their employees. So that, and sometimes they pay by the day, so that helps a lot. But yes, if they need banks, any barrier like that, if they need a bike to get to work, for example, we had somebody call from a call center saying, we'd like to hire this young woman. She can't, the buses aren't running. Can you get our bike? We got her a bike. They hired her. Sometimes it's like a really simple fix, to get someone working.
Some communities, there's like lists of employers that organizations like you have that are willing to go out of their way to take a chance on homeless people or folks coming out of drug rehab or whatever it might be. Is there such a thing here that you have access to, and who might some of those employers be, I guess?
Mm-hmm. We do have a list of partner businesses. Bobo's Bars actually just partnered with us to help to hire some of our participants. We have job fairs that we hold at the Murphy Center for like labor people ready, I think, and things. But yeah, I think part of our job in that program is talking to businesses about how they actually can make it work. And when we track our 6-month job placement rates with the labor department at the county, and our 6-month placement rates are about at 60%, 65%, and the labor department has told us that in the average population, it's about 70. So our folks aren't that far off from housed people in terms of keeping jobs. So thank you. So I would love to talk about all our programs, but I won't. The important takeaway is if you know somebody needs help, the Murphy Center is the place to start, and chances are we have a place to help them or a partner agency that can work with them. I did want to talk really briefly about some of the things we're doing at a higher level to help end homelessness for people, because it is really easy to get caught in the programs, but that only takes you so far if you're not looking at things at a systems level. So first off, we have about 400 people in Fort Collins right now that are considered chronically homeless, meaning they've been on the streets of Fort Collins for at least 6 months and have at least one disabling condition. Each year, the Poudre School District has about between 1,000 and 1,200 kids or so who experience homelessness at least once in a school year. Family homelessness looks a lot different than street homelessness for individuals, as you can imagine. Most of the families we serve that are considered homeless by McKinney-Vento standards are doubled or tripled up, typically in mobile home parks, where their housing is really, really precarious. I probably shouldn't editorialize on why that is, but people certainly, there's issues of racism, and sometimes the park owners don't always have really fair and equitable rules. But in any case, those families are struggle to stay housed. But we have about 100 kids who are living in motels or in campgrounds each year, or vehicles. So it definitely is a problem. So how we're addressing this systemically is, first of all, we are a Housing First aligned agency. And if that's something that interests you to learn more, you can just Google Housing First. And basically, it's a philosophy that through research and experience has proven to be a best practice in helping people escape homelessness. Transitional housing, helping people get ready for housing, really ultimately doesn't work because it doesn't take into consideration this basic human needs and how human beings operate. And I think we've all been in a state of crisis for some reason or another, and you know, like what your executive brain functioning goes on the fritz. You spend a lot of time just trying to survive your day, and that's what happens when you're experiencing homelessness, is that your whole day is just, where am I going to eat? Where am I going to sleep? How am I going to keep myself safe? How am I going to reach out to my sister who's waiting for a call? How am I going to schedule this doctor's appointment? How am I going to just survive this boredom, of just getting through the monotony? So until people are housed, it's really hard for them to attend to other issues like getting my driver's license and looking for work and reconnecting with my family and going to church and voting and all those other things that we want everyone in our community to do. So all our services are aligned around housing first. It's how do we get this individual on a pathway to housing and as quick as we can? Because we know the longer someone spends homeless, the more difficult it is for them to escape homelessness. How we're doing that at a regional level is we participate in our region's continuum of care, And that's sort of the way HUD organizes how money flows from the federal government. And until about a year ago, Northern Colorado was lumped in with a balance of state. So there was this continuum of care in Denver, a continuum of care in Colorado Springs, and then the rest of the state was in this big group. But as Weld County and Larimer County have become more urban, our community's needs are very different than, along the western slope or the other rural areas. So we went to HUD, we petitioned for this new continuum of care. That took several years. We were finally awarded it, I think it was late 2019 or 2020. And Homeward Alliance was made what's called the HMIS lead agency. So we're the Homeless Management Information Systems, I think that's the right order, lead. So our job is to collect all the data for people who are experiencing homelessness in Weld and Larimer and create actionable data that informs the work of all the other organizations. So for instance, we have this system called coordinated entry, and I know this is sort of boring, but it's actually really cool. So basically what coordinated entry is all the homeless service providers in our region, in those 2 counties, have agreed to use a common assessment form. So that means if somebody comes to the Murphy Center, or they go to Crossroads, or they go to someplace in Weld, they're going to be asked the same questions. They're going to be administered a vulnerability index, which asks them things like, are you a veteran? Are you disabled? Are you a senior citizen? That person gets a score on this vulnerability index, and then their name is added to a by name list ranked by vulnerability. And each week there's a family CAPS group, coordinated entry, and there's an individual CAPS group. All the organizations get together and say, okay, who's new on the list? Is there an opening at Red Tail Ponds? Is there an opening at Mason Place? Oh, we just heard Care Housing has an opening. Who's the best person for that house or bed? Because what was happening before was whether someone got housed depended a lot on timing, how good of an advocate their case manager was, and even sometimes implicit bias. Like sometimes people naturally advocate harder for others. You might get someone that's really cranky, pain in the rear, and they might not get a level of service that this super engaging, but that's not fair, right? So we have about 400 or 500 names on the individual list right now, and about 52 names on the family list, on 52 families. And so as beds become available, they're matched with the right service. And again, that just creates equity in the whole system. So prior to the system, we didn't really know how many people were homeless, what were the characteristics of the people that were homeless, what did they need, and how could we fairly get them into housing as quick as we can. So that's kind of a big deal for our region. It's also not a small thing, brought in more money from HUD. So some money that used to be going to this balance of state is now going to Northern Colorado. So that means we can do more, build more affordable housing, we can get more vouchers, we can do more, more exciting things like that. Any questions about that?
So I'm just curious about the beds become available part of what you just said. So what's that look like? What, where does that happen? And,
Did you say the funds?
The beds that become available.
Oh, the beds,
Yeah.
sure.
How does that happen?
So we have some partners that have a portfolio of properties. So like Housing Catalyst is a big one here in town. And they have different types of housing depending on need. So permanent supportive housing is like what Mason Place and Red Tail Ponds is. Those are for people who have been chronically homeless, are veterans or disabled. And those are folks that need, pretty regular case management and just a community that's supporting them. Housing Catalyst may have other properties that are literally just like an affordable housing unit, like an apartment. And I'm not aware of all the different agencies that are involved in housing, but there's quite a few, and I believe they're all at the table. And then, landlord engagement is a big part of what we do too, is talking to landlords about, would you consider renting to the folks that we serve? Because there is a lot of stigma, and our governor just passed a law in the beginning of this year that landlords can't discriminate based on the source of income. So that means if someone has a voucher, a landlord can't say, no, we don't take Section 8, So we still hear that a lot, and so it's our job to just educate people and say, you actually can't do that, but hey, vouchers are an amazing thing because it's guaranteed rent from the government, so there are benefits to participating in the program. So.
Okay, so I'm not trying to take away from what you're doing. I think what you do is wonderful. So, but I do wonder, because I think the main problem is the discrepancy between pay and housing costs. And I know these are big issues. They're not easily solved. And I know it's also a nationwide problem. Any place anybody wants to live.
Very true.
You can move to Missouri, but hey, I've lived there. Don't want to live there. So does your organization, or do you know of other organizations that are trying to work on this? Because I moved to Cheyenne from Sacramento, California. And everybody talks about how expensive it is to live in California, but there's a lot of protections for the consumer in California. And people tend to make a decent enough wage to be able to live in housing. And I moved to Wyoming, where I guess you have hired at Sam's Club, they will give you a food stamp application and give you a list of subsidized housing programs.
Yeah.
Really? That's not corporate welfare? So I don't know how this problem is solved, but I would like to be more involved in it, I guess. But I have no idea where to go.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have the answer. I think we are working on that in very small ways, things like trying to help our clients get credentials so that they can increase their wages. So for example, we can pay for credentialing, but we won't if it's just to help somebody get a job that's going to be poverty wages. So if it's like an asbestos abatement certificate or something that's going to provide a living wage, we do. But I think that, we have to figure out that very big issue, and I don't know what the answer is to that.
Can you explain what the Section 8 vouchers are? Because I'm not sure everybody exactly knows how those work.
Sure, and I actually don't either. I know that there's a limited number of them in a community, and you can apply for them as an organization. And so basically what that does is, there's a couple different kinds, but one of them, for example, you pay 1/3 of your income to your rental unit, and the government makes up the difference. So as your wages rise, your rent becomes higher and higher, till hopefully you don't need the voucher anymore. But I think there's a couple categories of those, depending on your age and things like that.
Early on, you used a phrase, something like, your goal is to help people to housing, whatever that means for them. Can you talk about what it means to different people to be housed?
Sure. So it's a housing can be a journey for some people. One of our notorious guests, he spent 30 or 40 years homeless, and he said that he would always tell everyone he met on his travels that he was homeless by choice. But after he engaged with us, he said, I always told people I was homeless by choice because I thought that was the only choice I had. And to me, that sums it up, right? So we meet people where they are, and some people say, I don't want to live in a house. I don't feel like I fit in. And so for that person, safety may be maybe a motel, helping them get a weekly motel, like earn enough to pay for that. For others, we do something called a shelter diversion with everyone we see for the first time, to just figure out, is there an alternative to homelessness for you? Do you have a family member that might take you back? If you're having a landlord dispute, could we help you mediate that? Sometimes it's, people don't always have interpersonal skills, and they just say, oh, forget it, I'm leaving. But sometimes with a little support, they can negotiate some of that. That's not a huge percentage, but maybe 5% of the people we see we're able to divert right from homelessness. We don't just give people a bus ticket and say good luck in Florida, but if we can call that family member and confirm, yes, this is safe, yes, they can stay here for the long term, what do you need to help make this work, then we do that too. So, the other thing I wanted to really briefly mention, because I have a feeling that this group would be interested in this, but we also sit on a committee called the Camino a Casa Collective, and we sit on that collective with La Familia, Fuerza Latina, the Family Housing Network, and the purpose of that group is to meet housing needs for immigrants and people who are here undocumented. And I know you guys got to hear from Isaac, so we've written a lot of rent checks to Isaac. And so basically, we know that sometimes people don't have the right paperwork to qualify for certain kinds of assistance, or they might have an informal lease arrangement that makes them ineligible, or maybe they're a owner of a mobile home that's not allowed to sublet a room, because that's not allowed in most parks, but that person needs help. So instead of writing a check to a landlord, we sometimes will write it to the individual and just get some sort of note saying that that was used towards the rent. So we applied for funds through a private foundation specifically for funds that were really flexible, because we know the federal government and other sticklers are not going to want us to do that. But there's no sense in a family falling into homelessness for a few $100s. And frankly, we don't have a place for those families to go. So it's kind of this is a neat collaborative where we work together. We also did a year-long study with a CSU School of Social Work Research Center where they interviewed about 85 families, dozens of human service people, and really we're trying to gather feedback about what does homelessness look like in Fort Collins for families. And what we really heard from those families was they don't want to go to the Murphy Center because they don't identify with what they consider to be American homelessness. In the Hispanic culture, you'll take in your family members, even if that means risking your lease, because you don't let family members be on the street. And so also that they want to work with people who speak their language. And so we did hire a bilingual housing navigator who has deep roots in the Latinx community. And then we also honor relationships. So if someone comes to Fuerza Latina and says, we need housing help and I'm not comfortable going to Homeward Alliance, then we just work through that case manager. We don't make them come, tell their story to us. It's usually really traumatic, make them go through all these hoops, We just kind of work with our partners that way, and it's been really successful.
You mentioned a little bit about your fund. Can you talk a little bit about your funding sources? Because it sounds like you're helping so much, but where do you get your money? How much is it from? Donations, grants, what have you?
So we really have a huge patchwork of funders. We don't get Medicaid or anything like that. So we have some government funds for our reentry program that, ironically, that's our most fully funded program. Those are for folks that are leaving the criminal justice system and end up homeless. So that's a big source of funding for that program. But otherwise, it's just, it's $1,000 checks from Rotary clubs, donations from individuals. It's people who who attach their King Supers card to Homeward Alliance, so we get those, that change back. It's really quite a hodgepodge. Probably the most frustrating thing about this work is that we really do know how to solve homelessness. We know what works. We just don't have the resources to do it. And when it's theoretical, it's one thing, but when you're at the Murphy Center and you see 75-year-old people, in the snow coming in, it kind of ignites a little bit of anger there, because it doesn't have to be this way. We're just, like a lot of other social issues, we just don't have the funds to do it all right now. So that was kind of the bulk of what I wanted to be sure to cover, so I would be happy to take questions now.
Hi, Pam. I know we've been reading a lot the last couple of years about your work at Homeward Alliance with the city and lots of other partners, looking at the future of the kind of service center that you have at the Murphy Center, and possible sites for a future campus, and what that campus would mean in terms of continuing some of the work that you're doing, but also maybe having a different network of shelter options. I know especially in the winter, shelter gets really tricky to have enough space capacity with the partnership with the mission and with Catholic Charities and day shelter issues. And so I realize that that's a big piece, but just in terms of an update on kind of where you think that's at, or where you think that's headed, and what your hopes are for next steps and some of those big picture pieces.
Sure. So you may have read that the city convened like a committee that met once a month for a year. And I don't know, Corey, did you sit on that committee? No. There were pastors that represented. So basically the charge to that committee was, what could perhaps a centralized homeless service center site look like, and where could that be located? And the group did issue recommendations to the city, which I believe that they're still considering at this point. And I don't know that the committee really had any hard and fast recommendations, just that yes, it does make sense to cluster all the services together, because our folks spend a lot of time moving around the city, just trying to get from one place to another. Also, that site needs to be on public transportation site. The tricky part, of course, is the NIMBY, right? It's a big ask to ask a neighborhood to house an agent or like a site in their community. But we actually feel really positive that the right people are at the table, and people seem really excited to kind of move this forward and stuff. I think we're kind of running out of time, because in some ways we have to make a decision in the next couple of years, because the Fort Collins Rescue Mission, I don't know if you've ever toured that site, but it's kind of like a rabbit warren. It's a lot of small buildings, and it's not in an ideal location in downtown. Murphy Center has been full for several years, and I think Catholics at the same is kind of at a breaking point too. So big challenge for us last year was winter day shelter. We weren't able to bring in everybody inside because of COVID. So we actually did an exhaustive search of about 70 landlords, and we were not able to find one that was able to host us every day. Thankfully, the Westminster Presbyterian was able to host us on inclement weather days, but the rest of the year, we literally converted the front lawn of the Murphy Center to a day shelter. So we had propane heaters running, we had tents, we were serving our food out an exterior window, but it was really hard on the people we served, and we actually have seen an unusual number of deaths this last 6 months of just cardiac and other things, and we can't help but wonder if part of it was just a really, really rough winter outside. People spent a lot of time outside. a lot of our folks will go to, coffee shops or McDonald's, and you guys probably remember a lot of those were closed last winter. The library was closed. There wasn't a lot of places for people to go inside. So this winter, we're sort of facing the same thing. We don't really have an indoor location that's big enough for everybody yet. And we know that we don't have enough overnight beds because the cots right now have to be 6 feet apart. So we're looking at, what does it look like if, 40 or 50 or 60 people have to spend the night outside over the winter. So it's definitely a challenging problem that we have right now. So, yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I was wondering what your volunteers do.
So our volunteers do everything. We love our volunteers. We have one-time opportunities, and then we have ongoing opportunities. So for one time, for example, 4 times a year, we do a family resource fair, and Corey's come and juggled there. I don't know if anyone else has been able to come yet, but they're super fun events. Bring in like a... It was. It was. So about 100 to 150 families come, and they can select winter coats and boots and clothing, and we invite 10 or 15 different providers so they can, talk with someone from the food bank or Matthew's House or the different providers. So we need setup help, we need people to help the families, like select clothing and stuff like that. Our next one is the first Friday in December, and for the first time ever, it's going to be in Loveland at Foundations Church. So if you go on our website, there's a little box for volunteer, and that'll bring you to our volunteer portal. You can sign up for a newsletter and just get updates. And then we have regular opportunities, like every Monday through Sunday, we serve food through a window at the Murphy Center. It's not cooking, it's just we assemble prepackaged items. So sometimes people sign up for a once a week shift, once a month shift. That's a really great way to get to know the people we serve. Basically everything in between. Also, if you have a skill that you want to share, we're always looking for people to offer those up. That's how we got mobile laundry, our bike repair program, some other things that we do. Oh, and I'd be in big trouble if I didn't mention this. We have a very specific need right now that's actually I think kind of fun. We operate a children and teen clothing closet right next door to Family Housing Network. It's in a storefront at LeMay and Prospect. And we need people to help us sort children and teen clothes and food, family food, and like merchandise it. So that's kind of a neat thing where you're not with a big group of people. It could just be you or a partner or something. And that we just heard from our dedicated volunteer Barb that she needs help. So it's at LeMay and Prospect, right next to Family Housing Network Day Shelter.
So obviously the goal is 100% success rate. So how do you follow the homeless people until a certain point? I mean, how do you measure success with what you guys are doing?
So that's an imperfect process for sure. People that have a case manager, we measure 6-month housing retention rates. For most other people, we just say, if you need help, if you short on rent, if you need clothing, whatever, reach back out to us, and they do. But that doesn't give us a good idea necessarily of people who may move and experience homelessness somewhere else. But for a certain percentage, we are able to follow, we do record their housing retention rates.
I'm aware that a lot of homeless people have pets, dogs, and do you have any system for dealing with that?
We do, actually. We're really lucky. So the Murphy Center's pet friendly, so people can always bring in their pets. And there's an amazing organization in town called the Street Dog Coalition that Dr. Geller runs. And they're in the Murphy Center once a week. They're one of our partner agencies, and they provide free veterinarian care to animals that are homeless. And they have this really great philosophy It's like something like caring for both ends of a leash. So a lot of times we're able to encourage people to get help by engaging with their pet because they love their pet and they care for their pet. We always have pet food at the Murphy Center, and then I know Dr. Geller and his team have gone out of the way to help our guest pets get surgery, help them become certified as service dogs, and just lots of things like that. Tuesday afternoons, it's the best time at the Murphy Center, the cutest time at least.
You talk about the fact that in my former work, all these families would fall in and out of homelessness because they're just so little safety net they have in their personal lives. They're actually working, but they don't have days off. They can't go to school conferences, that kind of thing. So can you talk about that a little bit?
So that's our experience with the families that we work with, is that the vast majority, almost 100%, are working families, and they're, in probably all of our minds, they're essential workers. They're the folks that are, keeping our community going. And if you do the math, right, with your average wage for a lot of entry level, or even like new teacher wages, or salespeople or whatever, and then you look at the cost of housing in Fort Collins, the math really doesn't add up very well, right? About 55% of renters, all renters in Fort Collins, are cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. And that's a well-known, well-studied figure, that those families will have housing insecurity because, like you said, if you need to take a couple days off because your children are sick or your mom is ill, these are jobs that will not probably pay you to have the day off, and you might even risk your job by taking them. Also, there's been some studies that show as cities and towns become less affordable, so the more people that are in that cost burden category, there's always a corresponding rise in homelessness. So it's one figure follows the other. So if you think about more than half of our renters right now are already cost burdened, that's a real problem that we have to tackle as a community. I think the living wage, if you have one adult and one child, it's something like $22 or $23 an hour. So most of the young families aren't making that consistently 40 hours a week with benefits and that sort of thing. So.
What percentage of your population do you say are seniors? Because they face special challenges.
They do. About 20% of the people we serve are 62 and older. This year we had somebody that was 86 years old. Sometimes what happens is, people don't necessarily want to live in an assisted living type situation. So that was her situation. But we see a lot of senior citizens. Also, people who experience homelessness tend to have geriatric conditions about 20 years past their natural age. So when you see our folks in their 50s, they often look like they're in their 70s. And so that's a consideration too. One of our big, audacious goals for our organization is to strengthen our healthcare services for the people we serve. We would love to maybe have a clinic one day at the Murphy Center. There's an amazing model program called Stout Street Clinic in Denver that basically has healthcare just wrapped into all the other homeless services they provide. Because we don't want people going to the emergency room, right? We don't want them calling an ambulance if they can help it, but sometimes that's what people are told to do. We've also heard from some of our guests that there's something called the hobo plan. If you go to a local hospital, if they see 242 Conifer Street on your ID, that in their minds they feel like they're given a certain level of treatment. They're assumed to just be seeking a bed. And We actually had one woman who was discharged from the hospital, from the ER, and on her discharge paper it said homeless was her diagnosis. And a couple months later, she was diagnosed with very advanced cancer. So, I mean, who knows what happened in that situation? I wasn't there, but there's definitely people who are homeless experience like unique healthcare needs that you want trained healthcare providers to intervene with.
Do you link people up with mental health services too?
So the question was, do we connect people with mental health services? We're really fortunate that Summit Stone Health Partners is stationed at the Murphy Center. They provide ongoing counseling for mental health and substance use disorders, and they also have walk-in hours. We couldn't operate the Murphy Center without them.
I'm just curious what motivates you to do the work you do. It's very challenging work, and you got to get yourself out of bed in the morning and have some level of excitement to go do it, I guess. And you know, what drives you into this, or and maybe some of your background and how you got into this work?
Sure. So I was raised in upstate New York in a rural area, and we were definitely low income. I was the kid with the little ticket that let me get the free lunch at school. But I had a really loving, stable family where we didn't worry about housing insecurity. But I remember, you know, thinking, oh my gosh, my mom's so worried, is a washing machine gonna break? You know, and how is she gonna scrape up money for school clothes? And so I think I just always had an awareness that, you know, that some of my friends, their parents weren't worrying about that. And I think I've always also been really passionate for underdog issues, and sometimes I think about all the benefits I had in my life of just having healthy, loving parents, and it was challenging for me, and I think about people who didn't have those things and how tough it must be. So I guess at a basic level, it's kind of it's personal to me, but I also just find the work really fascinating. Before I worked at Homeward Alliance, I was a volunteer, and I met the volunteers, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are my people. I love these people. I love their open hearts. I love that they just want to do something to help, even if it's small. And then I got to know the staff, and they felt the same way. So sort of just stumbled into it, I guess.
What would you say would be if people wanted to support you either individually or if the church wanted to support you further, because we do support you, we know, corporately, what would you consider your greatest needs to be at the moment?
So we call this distribution. So from a collection standpoint, we are gearing people up for the winter. So if you have used winter coats, boots, hats, mittens, you want an excuse to buy yourself something new this year, we are always collecting those. We gear up about 3,000 children, teens, and adults. So it is a big lift to find enough winter coats and gear to keep people safe. On our website, we have a full list of things that we just are always looking for, and that's a great way to help, because most of those items, you don't need to purchase them. You probably already have them in your home, and then we'll make sure that they go to good use. Financially, we always need financial support, and that can be done in lots of different ways. I mentioned that King Soopers card. So if you go to our website and click on ways to help, you can actually link your King Soopers card to a charity. If you select Homeward Alliance, it doesn't cost you anything, but they allocate a certain portion of their sales to the nonprofits. So each quarter we get about $700 or $800 just from people who link their cards to us. We have monthly donors, which I personally think is a great way to give. I actually give to Isaac each month. It's easier on the budget. You can just sign up. We have donors that give $5 a month. But those are amazing donors for us because it gives us stable monthly funds we can count on. And then, of course, end of the year gifts. If any of you are all if you had a good year in the stock market and are feeling charitable, we'd be happy to put some of that to good use. But really, any way you want to give, through gear or volunteering, financial support, we really need all three. So we just look to people to say, like, what's the most meaningful way for you to give, and we're thankful for it. So.
We have any questions from the computer world?
Wonderful.
No.
No questions. Oh.
Okay.
I was hoping for a stumper, although yours was pretty close.
You want to close?
How do we narrow the housing wage gap? That's a tough one. Hey, how are you?
Good to have you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Pam. Let's show appreciation to Pam. Our friends at Homeward Alliance have been such a great partner. When they were still Homeless Gear and operating a van, one of our first dipping our toe in the water here at First Press, probably almost 5 years ago now, was just the very simple act of offering our parking lot as a place for that Homeless Gear van to stop on its regular path. And that provided an opportunity for a few of our folks from our mission and outreach team to take advantage of them being here and to go out and serve hot chocolate and just try to be present and be a point of connection and relationship, which we know that those relationships are a really key part, in addition to housing first, just being known by people and finding a sense of belonging and community, which is one of the best assets, frankly, that we have as a community of faith, a place for people to belong. So thanks, Pam, and to David, your colleague, and Linda, and so many others who have been around often, and we continue to enjoy our partnership with you. Next week, David Williams, pastor of Abyssinian Church here in Fort Collins and a longtime friend of First Press. He and the local rabbi this summer have started an organization entitled Our Commitment to Self and Society, which is really an initiative that's rooted in the hope of addressing some of the issues of systemic racism by looking at issues of fair employment practices and some other commitments that they're hoping, particularly from the kind of corporate world, people will engage in, but also happy to have partnership in that with communities of faith, interfaith, obviously, with the rabbi's involvement. And so we'll have David with us next week and look forward to his time with us as well. But with that, we wrap up tonight. Thanks to our friends online. Thanks to Michael Macbeth, our AV coordinator, and to Karen Rested, our computer guru, for helping to make all these connections possible. Let's just close with a word of prayer. Good and gracious God, we are so, so grateful that truly it is an alliance that we have with these partners at Homeward Alliance and the Murphy Center and so many others who spend their days, who get up every morning, as David reminded us, with an extra skip in their step, ready to continue being your hands and feet, serving some of the most vulnerable in our community, providing them not only with housing and food and clothing, but opportunities for dignity, for independence, for an opportunity to work and to be an active and vibrant part of our society, to find places of belonging and places where they can make their own contribution in the world as well. So for all of these folks and for all of these things, we give you thanks and ask that you keep us safe and in your care until we meet again. Amen.